I shouldn't have been standing there, not in the quiet hallway of her house, not with the sound of rain tapping softly against the window. But there I was, trying to convince myself it was normal to linger, to notice the way her fingers brushed the rim of her coffee cup, the faint tremor in her hand when she laughed. She didn't look at me, not really, but every small movement felt like it was meant for me. She was beautiful in a way I hadn't seen before, not the kind of beauty that demanded attention, but the kind that made you hold your breath without realizing it. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, streaks of silver threading through the dark brown, like a story she hadn't told yet. I couldn't stop staring, even when I tried to look away. There was something in her eyes, a quiet weight, a hint of sadness that made me want to reach out and fix things I didn't even understand. "I didn't expect you today," she said finally, turning toward me. Her voice was calm, measured, but the slightest curve in her lips betrayed something sharper, something playful. "I thought I'd drop by," I muttered, wishing the words sounded less clumsy. My chest was tight, every word sticking in my throat. She set down her cup slowly, tilting her head in that way that always made me feel exposed. "You know," she said, her tone shifting just enough to make me shiver. "Sometimes you pretend you don't want something, but maybe you do." The words were light, teasing, but there was an edge I couldn't ignore. My stomach turned. My heart slammed in my chest. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but I was afraid of hearing the answer. The room smelled faintly of coffee and rain, and the soft hum of the heater was the only sound between us for a long moment. I noticed how she shifted slightly, how her fingers flexed on the edge of the table. Subtle signs I didn't fully understand, but that screamed louder than anything she could say. "I'm not pretending," I said finally, my voice lower than I intended. It sounded ridiculous even to me. She raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "Are you sure?" I couldn't look away. The way the light hit her face, the curve of her jaw, the way her eyes seemed to search mine like she was trying to read my thoughts. I wanted to tell her everything. About how I'd thought about her for months. About the ache in my chest every time I imagined her alone. About the moment I realized that some part of me had been waiting for her all along. Instead, I just stood there, feeling small and exposed, caught somewhere between wanting to laugh at myself and begging her to make the next move. She took a step closer, and I could feel the heat from her body, subtle but undeniable. My hands twitched at my sides. I wanted to touch her, to tell her it was okay to feel this tension, to admit that maybe we had been circling each other for far too long. Then, as if the universe decided to punctuate the moment, the doorbell rang. A sharp, sudden sound that cut through the tension like glass. We froze. Her hand hovered midair, mine clenched without thinking. Neither of us moved first. My pulse raced, my thoughts a chaotic mess of longing, fear, and something I couldn't name yet. She gave me a look that made my stomach twist. A look that asked a question, warned me, teased me, and promised me everything all at once. And I realized, before either of us answered the door, that nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time I stepped into the living room, though the air still smelled of wet pavement, and her faint perfume, something floral, almost wistful. She motioned me to sit on the couch, and I caught the hesitation in her eyes, like she was measuring what she was allowed to share, and with whom. "I didn't always live here," she said softly, settling into the armchair across from me. Her fingers twisted the edge of her scarf, betraying the calm in her voice. "Before my divorce, it felt like I was always apologizing for being too much or not enough. I lost a lot of time." I nodded, not knowing what to say, but wanting desperately to say I understand. The words never came. Instead, I leaned back, noticing the subtle quiver in her jaw, the way her eyes lingered on a photo frame by the mantel, a younger version of her with a man whose absence seemed to echo in the room. "I've had complicated relationships," she added, almost as if testing me. "Mostly with men who are too certain of themselves. Or not ready. Or not me." She let out a soft laugh, almost bitter, and I realized she was looking for something she'd never had. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't want to imagine her in pain, but I also couldn't look away. I'm not sure I ever had someone like you, I admitted, voice low. I tried to hide how fast my heart was beating, how aware I was of the space between us. She tilted her head, and something flickered in her gaze: curiosity, amusement, maybe recognition. Someone like me? I swallowed. Someone who sees you. Really sees you. Her smile faltered, just a little, and I saw the weight she carried, the hesitation, the caution honed by decades of guarding herself. I understood why it was risky. I wasn't just some kid knocking on her door. I was the friend of her daughter's cousin. And yet, here we were, sharing the kind of quiet intensity that made the world outside irrelevant. We both stayed silent for a while, letting the sound of rain fill the space. I noticed the way her knee brushed against the arm of the chair, how her hands lingered near her lap as if she wasn't sure what to do with them. Every small gesture spoke louder than any words could. Then, without thinking, my hand brushed against hers as I reached for the mug she'd left on the coffee table. A spark, brief but undeniable, shot through me. Her fingers didn't pull away, not immediately, and for a suspended moment, it felt like the world had narrowed down to that single touch. We exchanged a look, something unspoken hovering in the air. It wasn't about rushing or acting, it was about acknowledgement, a mutual recognition of something fragile, dangerous, but too irresistible to ignore. And just like that, the space between us wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, quiet, pregnant with possibility. I realized then that whatever this was, whatever it might become, it wouldn't be simple. But the thought didn't scare me as much as it thrilled me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her sitting there, hair falling over her shoulder, the curve of her smile that didn't reach the corners of her eyes. I kept thinking about the way our fingers had brushed, how her warmth had lingered longer than it should have. By the time I went back the next afternoon, I was trying to convince myself it was just curiosity. Innocent curiosity. But the second she opened the door, my resolve crumbled. She was holding a book, one I'd noticed on her shelf the day before, a dog-eared novel, edges frayed, like it had been read 100 times. "You came early," she said, voice casual, but the way her eyes flicked to mine betrayed her own hesitation. I wanted to return this," I said, holding up a copy of my own book, though my hand was shaking. Her lips twitched. "You've been here more than once without a reason. You're impossible." I felt a laugh rise in me, but I swallowed it. Impossible. Maybe that's what I'd become for her too. We settled into the living room, rain drumming softly against the windows. I noticed her shoulders tense when the phone buzzed on the counter. Her husband, she'd reminded me once, lived overseas, but occasionally called. She didn't answer. I wondered if that was the first line of defense, the thin boundary between the life she had and the life she might want. "I shouldn't," she started, then stopped. Her gaze drifted to the window. I saw the way her fingers gripped the edge of the chair, the slight tremor in her hand. I knew that feeling, wanting something you weren't supposed to. "I shouldn't what?" I asked softly, leaning closer without meaning to. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tension in the air said enough. Then she moved slightly closer, and my heart slammed. For a brief moment, it felt like we were going to collide, not just physically, but in every emotion we'd been holding back. The sound of the front door opening startled both of us. Her neighbor, an older woman with a knack for gossip, appeared in the doorway, smiling far too brightly. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said cheerfully. "I just came to drop off." Her words died when she noticed me. The look she gave was faintly accusatory, like she had read too much into the scene, though I wasn't sure what she had seen. Her presence made the room feel smaller. Our hands, almost touching, retreated. Her posture stiffened, and I realized just how delicate this moment was, how fragile the bridge between restraint and giving in had become. Once the neighbor left, the silence returned, heavy and loaded. We didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, she let out a shaky breath and said, almost whispering, This, whatever it is, it's dangerous. I nodded, though my body betrayed me, leaning toward her again, craving just a fraction of closeness. I could feel the pull between us, magnetic and undeniable, even as we both tried to resist it. And for the first time, I noticed how her eyes softened, how her lips twitched in a way that promised everything we weren't supposed to have. My pulse raced. I wanted to close the distance, but I didn't. Not yet. But the tension hung there, like a live wire, sparking every time we glanced at each other. And I knew, even if either of us admitted it, that nothing, no rules, no distance, no reason, would keep us apart for long. I couldn't stop thinking about her all day. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her. Every shadow on the street made me imagine her standing there, smiling that small, impossible smile that made me feel like I'd been waiting for her all my life. When I got back to her apartment, she was already there, standing near the window, looking out at the wet city streets. The light caught her hair, highlighting the streaks of silver like threads of memory I could never untangle. She didn't turn when I entered, and the silence stretched in a way that made my chest ache. "You didn't answer your phone again," I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice was tight. She didn't reply immediately. When she finally spoke, it was quiet, almost hesitant. "It was my daughter." She called to talk. About college. About boys. I felt it immediately, the sharp twist in my stomach. Jealousy, ugly and sudden, clawing at me. I wanted to be the one she answered, the one she looked for, the one she thought about when no one else was around. I hated that I wanted it so badly. "I see," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, but my hands curled into fists at my sides. Her eyes finally met mine, and I could see the guilt flicker there, the unspoken rules we were both trying to navigate. I didn't mean to ignore you. You know that." "I know," I muttered, but it wasn't true. I didn't know. I knew I wanted her, needed her, but I also knew that wanting her like this was dangerous, reckless. Still, I took a step closer, the pull between us undeniable. She flinched slightly at the movement, and I realized just how fragile this was, how easily it could break. My heart pounded. I can't pretend I don't feel this," I admitted, voice low, trembling. Her lips parted, and for a moment I thought she would say something, anything, but instead, she looked away, pressing a hand to her chest as if to steady herself. "You're too young," she whispered finally. "And I'm not. I'm complicated." Her words came in broken pieces, each one heavy with years of regret and caution. "I don't care," I said, stepping closer. I want this. You." Her eyes widened, and I could see the war inside her, desire and fear clashing, a storm she couldn't control. She opened her mouth, then closed it, shaking her head. We were only inches apart now. I could feel her warmth, smell the faint hint of her perfume, see the rapid pulse at her neck. My hands itched to reach for her, to bridge the space between us, but something stopped me, fear, respect, anticipation. I didn't know which. The silence stretched, charged, unbearable. And then, as if the universe itself had decided to hold its breath, her phone buzzed again on the counter, the sharp ring slicing through the tension like a blade. She glanced at it, eyes flicking to mine, and the world tilted. Either of us moved, either of us spoke. And I realized, in that suspended heartbeat, that everything was about to change, one way or another. The moment passed, or at least I thought it had. She had answered the phone, murmuring something I couldn't catch, her expression unreadable, and I had let myself believe that maybe we could just breathe, step back, and survive the tension. But then I heard it. Her daughter's voice, loud and unmistakable, through the phone's speaker. "Mom! Who's that with you? Are you seeing him?" I froze. My chest tightened. She glanced at me, panic flashing across her face. "It's nothing," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Just a friend. That's all." Her words hung in the air like smoke, but the way she avoided my eyes told a different story. My stomach dropped. She had lied, or at least bent the truth. And now, it wasn't just a secret between us anymore. I wanted to ask her why, but the words got stuck. Instead, I stood there, feeling the heat rise in my chest, not anger, exactly, but shock and hurt and a strange, raw need to understand. She knows? I finally managed, my voice tight. She nodded, biting her lip. Yes, and she thinks I'm making a mistake. I swallowed, trying to process it. A mistake. Maybe she was right. Maybe this, us, was reckless. Dangerous. And yet I couldn't step back. Not now. Not after everything we'd been through in such a short span of time. I don't care what she thinks, I said quietly, stepping closer, ignoring the tremor in my hands. I care about what you think. What you want. Her eyes welled for a moment, and I saw the years of caution, of regret, of trying to do the right thing, crumble just a little. She shook her head, a laugh, nervous, broken, slipping out. I can't just ignore this. I've been careful. Too careful for too long. I don't want careful, I said, voice rough. I want real. Even if it's messy. Even if it's wrong. She turned away, pressing her hands to her face for a moment, and I felt the sting of helplessness. I wanted to take her in my arms, to tell her that none of it mattered except that we were here, together, in this impossible, fragile space. Then she dropped her hands and looked at me, eyes wide and vulnerable. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. I shouldn't feel this way, about you. My chest ached. Every instinct screamed at me to pull her close, to erase the fear in her eyes. But I stayed still, letting the tension stretch. Letting the silence breathe between us, thick and charged. I can wait, I said finally, soft, deliberate. For as long as it takes. I'll wait for you. Even if you need time, even if everything else is against us. Her lips trembled. She blinked, trying to form a response, and I saw the fight inside her, the desire and the fear, tangled like the storm outside. Then the doorbell rang again. Not her daughter. Not her neighbor. Something else. Something unexpected. She froze. I froze. And in that instant, I realized that whatever decision was coming, it wouldn't just change us. It could change everything. The doorbell had stopped ringing, leaving a heavy quiet in its wake. I could feel her body tense beside me, small tremors betraying the calm she tried to wear. We both knew that whatever was coming, whatever we'd been circling for weeks, had to happen now, or not at all. I can't do this and pretend it's nothing, she whispered, voice breaking slightly. She turned toward me, eyes searching mine like she was asking a question I didn't need to hear aloud. I took a step closer, heart hammering, hands shaking. You don't have to pretend, I said softly. Not with me. Not ever. Her lips parted, and for a moment I thought she'd tell me to leave, that she'd step back and protect herself from whatever this was. But instead, she swallowed, blinked, and her hand lifted, trembling slightly, to hover near mine. The space between us was electric, every inch weighted with months of longing, hesitation, and unspoken words. I shouldn't, she said again, and I saw the conflict written across her face. Desire, guilt, fear, all twisting together in a knot that mirrored my own. I know, I murmured. But I don't care. I can't care about the rest. Only you. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She bit her lip, and my fingers itched to reach for her, to erase the distance with something real. But I didn't rush her. I waited, giving her the space to choose or to hesitate. And then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned in. My breath caught. The air around us seemed to thrum. I wanted to close the distance fully, to pull her into my arms, to let the world outside cease to exist. But instead, I stayed still, letting the tension linger, letting her take the lead. Her hand brushed mine. A simple, fleeting touch, but it sent shocks through my body. I traced the line of her fingers with mine, careful, reverent. She didn't pull away, and the way she looked at me, uncertain, raw, vulnerable, was enough. Enough to know that the barriers were falling, that whatever came next wouldn't be easy, wouldn't be perfect, but would be ours. I've been so afraid, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of losing control, afraid of everything. You're not alone, I said, moving a fraction closer. We'll figure it out. Together. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, the rain outside faded into nothing. We were suspended in that space between fear and desire, the world narrowing down to the rhythm of our breaths and the quiet understanding blooming between us. She leaned her head just slightly toward mine, close enough that I could feel her warmth, but not close enough to cross the line. Her lips hovered near mine, a promise and a question all at once. I could close the distance in an instant, but she didn't move. Neither did I. The moment stretched, fragile and charged, leaving everything unresolved yet undeniably shifted. The decision had been made, even if only silently. We weren't walking away from this anymore. But what would come next? That was the question neither of us could answer yet. For now, all that mattered was the quiet, the tension, and the truth, that we had finally found each other. We didn't rush. Not that day, not ever again. Somehow, in the quiet aftermath of everything, the tension, the near misses, the lies and truths we'd stumbled through, we found a rhythm. A fragile one, but ours. She let me help her with the small things at first, carrying groceries up the stairs, making tea, sitting together while the rain fell against the windows. The little touches, the shared laughter, the moments where she'd glance at me and let her guard drop just a fraction, became our language. We didn't need words to understand the pull between us anymore. I learned about her regrets, about doors she'd left unopened, opportunities she'd been too cautious to take. She learned about my longing, my hesitation, my constant fear of doing the wrong thing but needing to do the right one at the same time. We shared our pasts not as confessions, but as bridges, connecting the spaces we both lived in alone for so long. It wasn't perfect. There were mornings she'd pull away for a call with her daughter, afternoons when I'd retreat to my own apartment to let her breathe. But the push and pull didn't hurt, it felt alive. Real. Messy, yes, but honest. One evening, months after the first time we'd almost crossed the line, we sat on her balcony, rainlight shimmering off the wet streets below. I reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. I felt her warmth seep into me, like we were patching the holes the world had left in each of us. I was so scared, she said softly, that I'd ruin it. That I'd ruin us. You could never ruin this, I whispered. Not when it's real. She sighed, letting herself smile fully, the way I'd only glimpsed in fragments before. I finally believe it. That we're allowed to have this. And in that moment, I realized that love didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be easy. It just had to be real, and it had to be ours. We sat together long after the rain stopped, letting the quiet wrap around us like a promise. There were no grand declarations, no cinematic gestures. Just two people, finally aligned, finally seeing each other, not as an impossibility, but as something worth holding. Some nights, I still remember the tension of those early days, the brush of fingers, the hesitation, the fear that everything could shatter in a heartbeat. And I smile, because even those moments, as fragile and terrifying as they were, led to this. We had found our rhythm. Our own imperfect, human, beautiful rhythm. And I wonder now, as I watch her smile in the dim light, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?